In this video, we'll be looking at how to either create or edit a preset for your BeoLab 50s. In order to begin, we have to ensure that the smartphone is connected to the same network as the loudspeakers. Otherwise, your app won't be able to see the loudspeakers when you first boot it up. We'll start by booting up the Bang & Olufsen app, and that will bring us to a screen where we'll see all the presets that are currently available. If your loudspeakers are new, then you'll see two factory default presets, one for narrow mode and one for wide mode. You'll also see a volume control at the bottom and a mute button, and we can use those independently of changing presets. We'll begin by starting to edit one of the presets, and we do that by pressing the Edit button, which is the three dots at the top right of the screen. And that will then show us those same two presets again and a plus sign. If we want to create a new preset, we hit the plus sign. What we'll do instead is go in and edit the narrow mode. When we enter that narrow mode preset, we initially see three selections. The first is called beam control, the second is room compensation, and the third are the advanced features. We'll go through those individually in turn. To begin, we'll start looking at the beam control. When I select that, it brings us to a second screen. On this screen we have four parameters that we can adjust. The top of the screen shows us an icon where we can select either the narrow or the wide beam from the loudspeaker. And just below that you can see whether we're working on the master speaker or the slave speaker. And you can go back and forth between those two just by swiping back and forth on the screen. At the bottom, we can see three additional parameters. One is the speaker role. Depending on how your loudspeakers are arranged in your room, you may have the master on the left, it may be on the right. So you do need to be able to select whether the master is the left channel coming in on the audio signal or the right channel. And of course, if you select left for the master, then it automatically will select the right channel for the slave, and they'll reverse as you select accordingly. The final two parameters here are the distance and the level. In order to set the distance, what we're measuring here is the distance from the listening position to the loudspeaker. So what we'll do is use either a laser measuring device or just a ruler and try to be as accurate as possible. Put in the distance from the listening position to each speaker. So what I'll do now is select distance and then adjust from this listening position the distance to my master speaker, and then I can swipe over to the slave and adjust its distance as well. And I've already measured those in advance using a laser measuring device sitting here. Finally, we can adjust the level. And what the level is doing is accounting for the difference in the perceived level of the speaker at the listening position. If you're sitting exactly in the middle of the room and everything is set up symmetrically, then you're going to probably want to set the levels of the two speakers to be the same, because they will appear to be the same level sitting in the center of the room. However, if you're off center, if you're sitting to one side of the sofa, for example, then you're closer to one loudspeaker than the other. And you'll probably want to turn that closer loudspeaker down a little to make it appear to be the same level as the more distant loudspeaker. There are two ways to do this. One is to adjust the level using say a pink noise or a noise signal in the loudspeakers and measure it with a sound pressure level meter. An easier way to do it is to just put on some music that has a very clear center image, say a pop tune with a lead vocal. And what you want to do then is adjust the level of the closer loudspeaker down a little until the lead vocal appears to be in the middle, centered between the two loudspeakers. It's always smartest to do this after you've adjusted the distance, because the distance, which is your delay time, the time of arrival from the two speakers, that's a much more important cue to tell you where things are in space. So it's always better to adjust the distance first, and that can be done with a measurement, and then to adjust the level afterwards, either with a measurement or to just simply do it by ear. We'll now go back to the previous menu by hitting the arrow key in the top left corner of the screen. And now we can see the room compensation. We'll do that next. That's the second on our list. When you first buy the loudspeakers, there are no room compensation filters built in, of course, because we can't predict how your loudspeakers will behave in your room. So we'll have to create a room compensation filter from scratch. To make a new filter, I again press the Edit button, which is the three dots on the top right of the screen. And I'm going to press the plus sign. That means I'm going to make a new filter. However, before I do that, I'll have to ensure that my microphone is connected to the loudspeaker already. So I'll go over and do that now. If I didn't have the microphone connected, then when I press that plus sign, the loudspeaker will tell me that there's no microphone detected, and it won't let me go further in the process. So now we're ready to create a new room compensation filter. I've placed the microphone at the listening position. Now I'll press the plus sign. The first thing that will happen is that the app will ask me to name the filter. So I'm going to call this Sofa ARC for active room compensation. I'll save that. And now it brings me to a screen that tells me where to place the microphone. There are two different recommended placements. One is if you have a filter for one listening position for one person, and that's what we're doing here now. In that case, you're going to place the microphone at the listening position and then slightly maybe below and forward and slightly above and behind the listening position. The other option is that if you're making a filter for a larger listening area, then you have to cover that area. So you have one microphone position in the center of, say, the sofa, one on the far end, and one on the other end. And that will cover a larger area when the filter is created. Scrolling down to the bottom of that page now, we'll see a button with a microphone on it, and that will begin the measurement process. As soon as I hit that button, you'll start hearing tones coming out of the loudspeakers. There'll be 6 tones from each loudspeaker, and you'll hear both loudspeakers do the measurement procedure in turn. It's very important to be as quiet as possible during that measurement procedure. That doesn't just mean that you shouldn't talk while the measurements are happening, but you should also make sure that, for example, there's no traffic noise from outside, because any extraneous noise that is happening while you're doing the measurement can infect or affect the measurement. And so, for example, if you have a lot of traffic noise or background noise in the low frequency region while the measurement is being done, then the end result is that the speakers will think there's a lot of low frequencies being amplified in the room, and therefore they'll take low frequencies out. So in order to make this measurement as accurate and as precise as possible, you should try to ensure that not only you are as quiet as possible, but that all extraneous background noises are attenuated. So now that I've made sure of that, I will hit the microphone button and we'll listen to those tones and watch the progress on the app. So now the first set of measurements is done. I'll have to move the microphone and repeat the process. That's the second set of measurements done. Now what I'll do is place the microphone to the left side and slightly behind and above the listening position. And now I'll start the procedure again. So now that the three measurements are done in the three different positions for the microphone, I simply go back and I can see that my filter has been created under the room compensation menu. Note that those room compensation filters that we can create, we just made one, we could make up to 5. Those are independent of the preset. So you can select any room compensation filter in any preset. You can also select combinations of them. So for example, if I were to make one room compensation filter for the center of the sofa and another for the dining room and another for a listening position over here, I could select all 3 of those in a given preset and make a party setting, for example. Finally, we'll look at the advanced features. There are 2 here. The first is called latency mode. In order for BeoLab 50 to do the processing that's required to control the beam width, it takes some time for the computer to do its work. So from the time that the audio enters the input of the loudspeaker to the time sound actually comes out, there's a delay. That delay can be either set to 25 milliseconds, which is relatively fast, or 100 milliseconds, which is quite long, but gives us a better performance of the loudspeaker. The problem is that if we do set it to the long latency or the long delay mode, then we will not have lip sync with a television that isn't a Bang & Olufsen device. So we have to set that latency mode according to what the source is. When you enter the latency mode, you can see you have 3 choices, either auto, high, or low. If you're using your loudspeakers with an audio-only source, like a music player, then you want to put them in the best quality or the best performance mode, which is the high latency, the longest delay. And you can set that here manually by pressing the high button. If you have them connected to a non-Bang & Olufsen television and you want to preserve lip sync with that device, then you'll need to put the loudspeakers in low latency mode. That will give you a slightly lower performance, especially in the low frequencies. However, at least the audio will be in sync with the video. The last mode is the auto mode. This is if you have a Bang & Olufsen television as your source connected to the BeoLab 50s. What that does is it tells the loudspeakers to obey the latency setting that's given to them by the Bang & Olufsen television. So that can be automated, and it's according to what the source is, whether you're listening to audio only or different TV channels or maybe a Blu-ray. The TV can decide what's the best latency mode for the loudspeakers and change them on the fly accordingly. Once you've assigned the correct latency mode to the BeoLab 50s, you exit this menu, and that leaves us with one parameter in the advanced settings. That's the speaker preset. You can't change this preset number. This is a number that's assigned to the preset that you've just created or edited. And the only reason to use this preset number is if you have a Bang & Olufsen television. In that case, what you're doing is using your speaker groups according to your different usage patterns. So for example, you might have a different speaker group for sitting on the sofa than going to the dining room. You can select different presets in the BeoLab 50s automatically from the television. So this is the place in the menus where you can find out what the preset number is so that you can select it in those speaker groups on the TV. Now that we've created the presets inside the BeoLab 50s, we have to go to the BeoVision television and create the corresponding speaker groups that match those parameters. We start by going to the menu and then going to Setup and Sound. Initially, we'll have to tell the television that we've connected the BeoLab 50s. We do that through the Speaker Connections menu, and you can see here that I've already done that. I've set the BeoLab 50s to be assigned to PowerLink 1 left and right, which is where I've connected them on the television. In addition, as you can see on the menu here, I've got PowerLink 2 connected to a pair of BeoLab 20s in the back for my surround speakers, and PowerLink 6 is connected to my BeoVision 12 built-in loudspeaker. We can now store this by pressing the Go button. And this brings us back to the previous menu. Now we'll want to set up a speaker group. And we do that by going to the Speaker Groups menu, choosing the group that we want to edit or create. I'll work on the TV speaker group right now. And that gives us a number of options. Initially, we'll set the speaker roles. So I'll go in here, and I'm going to set my BeoLab 50s to left front and right front. And I'm doing this based on the sound that I hear coming out of the loudspeakers. I know which is left and which is right. But this is also controlled by which we've set to left and right in the BeoLab 50 app in the beam control menus. In addition, we've got a pair of BeoLab 20s in the back. I'll set those to left surround and right surround. And the BeoVision 12 built-in loudspeaker is set to center front. So I'm making a 5.0 loudspeaker configuration. And I hit Store again by pressing the OK button. Next, I'll have to go to the speaker distance and set those up. These are the distances from each of the loudspeakers to the listening position. Right now what I'll do is make a speaker group for one person sitting in the center of the sofa. So I've measured these distances in advance. And you can see those are almost all filled out here. The BeoLab 50s are set to be 4.5 meters from the listening position. That's the distance from each of the loudspeakers to the listening position. The left surrounds are only 1.1 meters from the listening position, and we'll just set the center front to the correct number, and that's 4.4 meters. And again, I'll hit Store, and that will save all those distances. We'll now go in and set the speaker levels. What we're doing here is making sure that each of the levels, the apparent levels of the speakers, are the same at the listening position. This is best done by using a sound pressure level meter or a sound pressure level meter app on a smartphone. When we go in here, what we'll see is that I've already done this in advance. As I go through each of these loudspeakers, I'll hear a noise coming from each speaker, and that can be measured with the smartphone or the sound pressure level meter. The best thing to do is to pick one of these speakers. We'll start with the left front since that's on the top, and we'll turn up the volume until the sound pressure level meter reads about 65 to 70 dB SPL with a C weighting, and that's usually around 70 volume step. What we'll do now is go to each of the other loudspeakers in turn and check the measurement on the SPL meter for each of them. So as I go through this, I'll hear a noise from each speaker. I've got them turned off right now so you can't hear them. And I'm going to set the level here using the left and right arrows on the remote to make sure that each of these individual loudspeakers gives me the same meter reading on the sound pressure level meter. And I'll go through each of these in turn. When I'm done, again, I hit Store. Finally, we have to ensure that we select the correct speaker preset on the BeoLab 50s for this speaker group. Since I'm making a speaker group for sitting on the sofa by myself, I'm going to want to use the narrow speaker preset that I've made in the BeoLab 50s. When we looked in the advanced menus in the BeoLab 50 app, we could see that that speaker preset number was number 1. So when I go in here, I want to set this number to number 1 to match. If I wanted the BeoLab 50s to be in wide mode, I would set this to preset number 2, because that was the preset number of the wide preset that we saw when we were editing the app, editing the presets in the app for the BeoLab 50s. So as I said, since this is a speaker group for one person sitting in the center of the sofa, I prefer to have these in narrow mode, which I've already found out in the app is speaker preset 1. And that's it. If you want to do more advanced setup, then you can go to the advanced settings and do things like change the parameters within the bass management or adjust the time alignment of the subwoofer. However, this isn't necessary. The parameters inside these advanced settings are set for you automatically by the television as you set up the parameters in these basic menu items that you see on the screen here. So if you are doing more custom installations, then you can go and use these advanced settings. However, it isn't necessary if you don't want to. From here, we now just go back, and we now have a speaker group that we can either select manually using the BeoRemote 1, or we can assign this speaker group to be the default for a given source, say for watching television or for a Blu-ray input or maybe the home media or YouTube, for example. I hope that this has provided an introduction to how to set up your BeoLab 50s. For more details and technical information on the loudspeakers, I recommend that you check the technical sound guide, which is available on the support pages of the Bang & Olufsen website.